Hey, I'm John Tabler. Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make sourdough bread start to finish, the easy, no hassle way that's going to nourish your body and you're going to love it. And so let's get started because I'm going to have to use some time lapse. It takes a few days to make the starter, which is your battery jump starter. Like if you have a car and you have no battery, you're going to need a battery jump starter. Well, it's the same thing with making sourdough bread, but once you have your starter made, you're good to go. You're going to make bread really quickly. And so I'm going to show you exactly how to do that right now. So first you need to have flour, and flour is ground up wheat or ground up another grain until it's like a powder. And once you have that, you can make what's called your starter. And that is just a small amount of it fermented. And fermentation is a process that's natural. It's miraculous actually, because it preserves itself at the same time becoming a very powerful energetic substance that has the ability to break down gluten and make all the nutrients assimilable, unlock all these nutrients. And so that's what we're going to do, is choose a flour. Now the best flour to use is the one that nourishes your body the most, and that is ground wheat. And so that's what I do. I have wheat berries, I grind them. If you don't have a grinder, and I'm just going to do a small amount of them. If you don't have a grinder, then you need to pick out your flour, and I'm going to show you that very briefly. But I turn this, this one's called a Wonder Mill, but there's a lot of different grinders, and I just did a small amount so we can hear that slow down. Kind of sounds like a vacuum cleaner. And so if you don't have that, you want to use 100% whole grain flour. This is organic. It's made by King Arthur. Anything else is going to be altered. It's either going to have the bran sifted out, which you can go with. It won't make any difference, but you won't have all the nutrients. But you don't want to go so far as to get one that's bleached and enriched. Enriched is a bad thing because they stripped it of nutrients, and it's basically a non-food. And bleached is done with chemicals, so you don't want that. This one is unbleached and it says all-purpose flour, but it still has enriched. So they did strip it at one point. They have to enrich it because they're required to by law, because they've already stripped it of nutrients and it's not allowed to be sold as food unless they enrich it. It's actually in the Code of Federal Regulations, but that's why I use a whole flour. You can always sift your flour if you're going to use it for pastries or whatever, but to make a starter, you want to use the most whole flour that you can, but they'll all work. They really will. But the main thing you do is once you have your flour, I'm just going to take, I'll show you how simple it is to make a starter. I'm going to take 1, 2, 3 tablespoons. Now I have about an inch and a half. I'll take a little bit more. It doesn't really matter. Now what we do is we add purified water, and you don't need to measure. There's really no point. This is very simple. You're just making Play-Doh, and that's too thick. I'll add a little bit more purified water. I use a reverse osmosis purifier. You don't want chlorine in it. Chlorine will render the whole thing not possible. It's a chemical that goes in there and takes away the natural bacteria of it. Now there's a paste there. You could leave it like that. I'm going to put it just a little bit more because it's a natural thing that happens. That's it. Now all I do is I'll cover it with plastic and set it aside. I'll come back in about a day and a half, and I'm going to do it again. I'm going to add about that much more and put some water, come back in another day and a half, put that much more and one more time, and by then it'll be bubbling and it will turn sour like a lemon, and you'll have your starter ready. I'm going to do that right now. You're going to see it in time lapse just like that. Okay, so it's been about a day and a half, and I've noticed over time that a day just really isn't long enough. You want to wait about a day and a half to put the next round of flour in, but you want to take it and smell, and just make sure it smells appetizing. There's nothing that smells funky or anything like that. If there is, you have something wrong with either your flour or your water, and so you want to start over. The water needs to be chlorine-free and purified. So what I'm going to do now is add 1, 2, 3 tablespoons of flour, maybe just a little bit more. It's really not that critical how much, just about that much. And then you put purified water in and stir it. And it's that simple. You don't want it to be too thick, but really just so you can stir it and mix it really well. And then cover it again, set it aside, and come back in another day. Okay, it's been another day, so now I'm going to add for the third time, and it should be ready. I smell it, it smells great. So I'm going to add 3 more heaping tablespoons, and then a little bit of purified water, and stir it. And then I'm going to set this aside, and it'll sit for, it should rise in about 6 hours, and your starter should really be good to go. Just a little bit more water in there. Stir it really well. And then I'm going to put the plastic back on it. You can take a look at it in 6 hours. If it's bubbled up and it's sour, you're ready to use it, or it can sit overnight, either one. What I do is then put the starter in the refrigerator, and when I get ready to use it, I add to it just like that, wait 6 hours, and then put that into the dough. Okay, now it's about 8 hours later, and now you can see the starter has bubbled, and I see now that it had bubbled clear up higher and gone back down a little bit. But that's all the more time it takes. Once you have your starter made, you're ready to make bread. So I'm going to set this aside. If you weren't ready to make it right now, you just put plastic over, put it in the refrigerator, and then spruce it up about 6 hours before you're ready to use it. And there you go. So now what we're going to do is get our flour ready. If you have a grinder, you want to grind your flour. If you don't have a grinder, you're going to get flour, and you can measure it if you like. I really don't measure it, but what I'm going to do first is run my grinder just to show you how that works. So I have wheat berries. They're called berries, the kernels, seeds. I put that in my grinder, and I'm going to leave the lid off. It works just fine. I got to hold down the other lid, or you'll have white powder going all over the place. That's not good. And it speeds up. There you go. You know it's done. And you don't want to open that lid too quick. Powder will go all over the place. But what you want to have is a good mixing bowl. So you have a good mixing bowl, and then what I do, I'm going to set this grinder aside now. That's how the grinder works. They're great, and the smell of the freshly ground flour is really good. So what I do is, again, I really don't measure. I just make a dough ball about the size of the bread that I would want. So you can use about that much flour. I eyeball it because I want to make this simple, because it really is a simple process. And once you do that, you put some water in. You don't want it to be runny, so you can, if you put the right amount of water in from the start, perfect. But if you don't, you can add to it. And if you put a little bit too much water, you can add a little bit more flour back. And so I'm just going to make what I call a dough ball. And this smells so good because it's so fresh, and all of the all the nutrients, everything are in there. So you can see now that this is just a little bit wet, and so I'm going to take a little bit more flour, and it's going to take you 2 or 3 times to make this perfect, but you don't want to make it more complicated than it needs to be. You're just simply making a dough ball with water and flour, and you want to have it right about like that is just about right. You want to have it be where the air can still puff it up, because it's not so hard that the air wouldn't be able to puff it up, but you don't want it sticky or runny. And so, but that's going to make for a really small piece of bread. So what I'm going to do, or a small loaf of bread, I should say, what I'm going to do is double it up. And again, once you get your amount that you want to do, if you want to measure it, go ahead and measure it. But if that's easier for you to remember that, whatever works the easiest for you. What I've found is that the easiest thing to do is the simplest thing, and so many places that I've seen that make sourdough complicate it. They make it like you're in chemistry class, and it basically ends up making people not do it. And really, it's very simple. All you're really going to do to make this is make a dough ball and not make it too stiff. And then once you do that, and you actually, you don't have to do this after. You can do it all at the same time, but I'm going to take that starter and I'm going to put, there's 1 big tablespoon, another. That would probably be enough. Like I said, it operates like a match or a jump starter, like almost like a match to paper. So you really, just like with a match, you know, you don't need a lot of fire to start a big one. You just need a spark. That's kind of how starter is. So, but once you put that in, then you can just work it through. I use 3, 2 would work, probably 1 would work, because you don't need much, because it's almost magical how it spreads. And then it doesn't take days for it to ferment like it did the first time. That since you're using it, that's exactly what it is, a starter. And it makes this work overnight. Now that's not a real big loaf, but that's just about perfect. And you can see that it really doesn't stick to my hands too much, but yet it's still, you can tell that it still has some ability to be elastic and move. And when the air blows it up, it won't just sit there stiff. So, you know, you're going to do this a couple times and figure it out perfectly for you. But that's just about perfect. And then what I do is take a container. Actually, I'm going to rinse my hands real quick. When you get done, if you rinse your hands, just again, make sure to dry your hands off of chlorine water or anything like that. I don't want to get that into the dough. And I did it in a way where I mixed water in the dough first and then added the starter. But you can mix water, the starter, and the dough all at the same time. Makes no difference. You just have to have your starter in there. Then what I do is I just take a towel, and these are all in the links in the description down below. This is necessary. You want to line the towel, then dust it with flour. That'll make the dough not stick to it. And then just take your loaf, set in, and sprinkle the top. Your bread is made now. Everything except the baking. You can make this in just a few minutes, well less than 5 minutes. And what I'll do is you can either take a lid and put over it, or you can just double up one. I've noticed that helps to keep moisture in and make it rise better. That's going to sit overnight now, say 12 hours. And then we're going to come back and bake it. So we'll be right back and do that. Okay, now we're back, and it's been 1 night. This fermented overnight. And so let's take a look at it. As I pull back the towel, you can see that it's risen some. It's kind of spread out, and you can smell the fermentation. Actually, it's a really good smell. And so it's very simple what we do now. All we're going to do is bake it. And you can use a cookie sheet or something like that and coat it with a little bit of olive oil if you need to. And then something you can do when you put it in the oven, we'll put it in for about 500 degrees for around 30 minutes. Every oven's a little bit different, and sometimes you need to check and just make sure, but that's what I've found works best. You can take a cookie or a cookie pan, bread pan, anything like that, and put a little bit of water in it and put it in the oven alongside the bread, and that'll keep it moist in the oven and imitate really what I use, which is a Dutch oven, which is really just a pot that you can put in the oven 500 degrees with a lid. And so that's what I use. It makes great bread. There's links in the description below. You can find one anywhere. It's just the one that I use. So we're going to use that. I've done it both ways though. Anything will work. I mean, it's just that sometimes when you put it in without a Dutch oven, the outside will get a little bit more crisp and the inside a little less. So it helps keep the heat up. So what we do now with this method, we just fold that down and turn it over. And since I put flour on the bottom, it should, in theory, it should pull away without sticking, which kind of is. And there you see it kind of stuck, but I just kind of roll that off. You really don't want it to stick. You just put a little bit more flour on. And there you have it. That's going to be our bread. And you can leave it like that and just stick it in and it'll crack where it cracks, or you can score the edge wherever you want with a knife. You know, some people use razor blades, and really what they're doing is artwork. And that would be like this right down the middle. I'll kind of do that, and then they'll draw things like leaves, but they're just drawing pictures in the bread. But it all goes to the same place in the end. So, but it does look great. So if you're making your own magazine or anything like that, you can draw the best pictures on it. So now I've done that. And now we just lift it, drop it in, put the lid on it. I'm going to bake it for 30 minutes. Usually in the last few minutes, I will take the lid off and let it just crisp up on the outside. Okay, so the oven's been preheated to 500. I'm just going to set that in, and we'll come back in 30 minutes and see how it looks. Okay, we're right at 30 minutes. And so what I'm going to do is take the lid off and let it cook for a couple more minutes, and that will crisp up the crust and make the bread really good. Okay, so that's about 4 more minutes, and now I'm going to take the bread out, and I have kind of a neat little method of extracting the bread. I just use 2 forks and poke them in the sides a bit and set the bread on a cooling rack. Allows the cooling to take place underneath it a little quicker. You don't have to use one, but it works really well. So we'll let this cool down. I'll cut into it and you can see really what it looks like. Okay, it's cooled down a little bit, and now comes the good part. We're gonna cut into it and see what it looks like. So let's do it. And it's still steaming. And there you have it. And you can see the bottom cooked just perfect. The Dutch oven cooks it really, really great. And once you have this bread, you can see the steam coming off of there. Once you have it, of course, you can put butter and honey on it. You can put a little olive oil, and then take a bit of salt, and if you see that, it's just awesome. Give a little dip. The interior is completely tender. The crust is just perfect. And you see how easy that is to make. There's a number of variations that you can do. You'll notice that this is a little bit more dense flour. That's because I'm using all of the kernel. But you can always take a sifter and sift out the bran and the heavier parts, and it will make it lighter for baking pastries, and it'll actually make it even expand more. Or you can cook it in a traditional bread pan. I mean, you can vary it up. The main thing is making the dough and fermenting the dough. Once you have that, you can do a lot of different things with it. But the main thing is you're going to have nourishing sourdough, the best bread ever. You see how quick this is to make, and what, one ingredient? You have wheat and water. And so it's incredible. You're going to love this. I know you can make it quick, and let's hear your comments down below. Like and subscribe. You have sourdough now. I'll see you in the next video.